Several of the policemen were hurt, and some of the policemen picked up bricks and threw them back at the veterans.
Then, the police opened fire. One veteran was killed. Another lay dying. City commissioners now requested that the president call out the military. By 4 o'clock, Army troops were in position behind the White House.
I had a press card, and I used it to get through the police line, and I saw advancing towards us some cavalry, some marching troops, a couple of not too formidable whippet tanks, and I suddenly realized that the commander was the Chief of Staff of the United States at the time, General MacArthur, and that assisting him were two majors, Major George Patton, and the other was Major Dwight D. Eisenhower.
The cavalry men pulled their sabers out of their scabbards. The troops fixed bayonets.
I heard a bugle sound, and they all drew their sabers, and then another bugle sound, and they started, the whole line started forward at a walk.
MacArthur's orders from Hoover were to surround the area on Pennsylvania Avenue and clear it without delay. In violation of those orders, MacArthur began to clear the entire city of the bonus army.
Here were young fellows, of course a lot younger than most of the veterans, were charged with going out and actually using force against people that had fought for the United States in World War I.
The men who had been under fire in Europe, and this was nothing new to them, kept the proper distance, and when a canister of tear gas would be thrown, part of the time they'd throw it back.
It was a feeling of frustration. You wanted to help both of them. You know you couldn't do anything. It was something that I'll never forget.
I happened to be near General MacArthur, and I saw him speak to a sergeant, and then I saw the sergeant collect a squad and then go down the row of ramshackle huts, and they'd throw a wad of newspaper into a corner of a hut and set that alight, and they went right down the whole row that way, and pretty soon the whole row was burning.
While MacArthur's troops mopped up downtown, 3 of his tanks held the bridge leading to Anacostia. Trapped inside the camp with the veterans were 600 of their wives and children.
My father was away in the tent, came back and told my mother that they were going to march on the Capitol. They was going to march in force. And, of course, my mother was a little upset about it. When we started across the bridge and I saw these soldiers, and I've never seen tanks and soldiers on horses and soldiers with bayonets before, and and my father was pretty headstrong. I didn't know whether he was going to try to go through them or not, but it was frightening. I remember very well. It was something I'll never forget.
Twice that night, Hoover ordered MacArthur not to cross into Anacostia, but the general chose to ignore presidential authority. A few minutes after 11 p.m., he sent his troops across the bridge. By midnight, all of Washington could see Anacostia burning.
What had gone on reinforced my feeling that it was too bad that the richest country in the world couldn't do a better job of caring for its own people. I just thought America didn't give a very good account of itself that night.
While the ruins of Anacostia smoldered, bonus marchers filled the roads leaving the capital. As the men retreated, General MacArthur reported that the veterans had intended to take over the government. Although MacArthur had violated direct orders, President Hoover took full responsibility for the eviction of the bonus army. In Albany, New York, Franklin Roosevelt, the Democratic candidate for president, listened to radio reports of the rout and told his aide he thought Hoover had already lost the election.
The next morning at the breakfast table, the president was very much upset. And he said to the cabinet, he says, I know there's no way we can explain to the American people what happened yesterday. Why did we have to use so much force against unarmed veterans? He says, why did we have to do that? He says, I know the Democrats are laughing themselves to death.
Roosevelt waged a strenuous campaign. Though his platform was vague, he suggested that his New Deal for the American people would make government more responsive to the suffering caused by the Depression. President Hoover remained opposed to increased demands upon the federal government.
What our people need is the restoration of their normal jobs, the recovery of agricultural prices, and of business.
A lot of people were out of work, and they weren't happy at all with the president. They blamed it all on him. And they took us after the speech was over and rushed us back to the train. It was ugly. It was ugly. They were screaming and they were shaking their fists at us, and we were frightened. I know the Secret Service men were frightened too for the president. It was a very anxious time.
As Hoover's campaign arrived in Iowa, more than 6,000 farms were in foreclosure. With Americans preparing to go to the polls, the head of the Farmers Union predicted, unless the president-elected gives farmers relief, he will be the last president of the United States.
These forces that I saw developing, coming from the heart of America, the unemployed farmers who used to have real farms and were in danger of losing them, and the bonus marchers, all were rising up and making their feelings and demands felt, and it really did usher in a new state of affairs.
Franklin Roosevelt, promising to restore this country to prosperity, won a landslide victory. In private that night, as his son James helped remove his braces, FDR confessed he was afraid. All my life, the president-elect said, I have been afraid of only one thing: fire. Tonight, I think I'm afraid of something else. I'm afraid that I may not have the strength to do this job. Roosevelt's son made no reply, and then his father added, after you leave me tonight, I'm going to pray that God will give me the strength to do this job and to do it right. I hope you will pray for me too.
Major funding for the Great Depression was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual financial support of viewers like you. The National Endowment for the Humanities, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and Lotus Development Corporation, providing software solutions that help people work together. The Great Depression was also supported by the generous donations of individuals and foundations. A complete list of funders is available from PBS.
This is PBS.